And joining us on the line now is Craig Milkowski from TimeformUS. Craig, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
We're doing well out here in LA. I wanted to ask you just a very basic question because a lot of the Timeform information is new to me. So tell me what factors in to some of these Timeform figures before we get to the races individually.
Okay, there are a lot like regular speed figures, and that final time's a big part, but we also include the pace and the running style of the horse. So if a horse is battling on the front end through fast fractions, they get a little extra credit, or if they are on the lead through easy fractions, they get a little deduction. And we also give the option to the user of including weight into the calculations if they like.
Okay, so let's get right into it then. From this past weekend, you mentioned that you give a little extra credit to horses that might be maybe dueling on the front end. You had to give some extra credit to Materiality and Upstart for duking it out all the way through the Florida Derby.
We did a very little because actually it was a slow first half mile, and then it kind of turned into a match race from there out where the pace really picked up from the half mile to the 3/4, and they battled down the lane. So final time was the big thing here, and they got big numbers. Materiality got a 109, Upstart a 108, which were career best for both. Way back to Amy's Flatter with a 92 in third, which was almost what she ran in her last race at Tampa. So she was a pretty good measuring stick that these two ran a really fast race.
Craig, is it more difficult to make a number for a race like this over a track that was so strange, so bizarre, so slow? I mean, you had, good maiden special event, fillies earlier in the card that went 27-1 for 7 furlongs. That's how slow this track was. And they came home the final 3/8 and 39-3. You don't see horses get 108 buyers or huge Timeform figures when they come home that slowly. Does it make it more difficult to make the number because the track was so dead?
I'll be honest, it would have been a difficult race if there weren't two other routes on the card. But since we had two other routes, there was plenty of sample to go by. And, the track was consistently slow throughout the card. So as long as the track's consistent, the number's not going to be tough. The raw times don't really matter that much to me.
And I know you got a skedaddle, but do you think that those horses that have worked so hard at 9 furlongs over that slow of a racetrack, it might be tough to come back, don't you think, in just 5 weeks in the Derby off of that grueling of a performance?
I think 5 weeks is probably plenty of time. I wouldn't want to see this in, say, the Arkansas Derby in 2 weeks when they only have 3 weeks to come back. But if you're going to have a race like this, I guess 5 weeks is about the optimum. And Materiality maybe needed that extra conditioning. I mean, it's only his third start, so.
Fair enough.
How about the fillies, Craig, in the Gulfstream Park Oaks, Bird at the Wire and Asking for Money? They both end up with the same figure in the end. They both earn a 90 for this performance.
Right, and they finished fairly close, but again, that was pace. And if you factor in the trouble Bird at the Wire had for a little bit there, I think she was the better horse, and she's also getting better as the distances get longer. We saw kind of a recurring theme here where the fillies are just much slower than the colts this year, only a 90 for the top two. And that's not always the case, year to year. Usually at this time of the season, fillies are able to run right with the colts, but it doesn't seem to be the case other than the race we're going to talk about later in Louisiana. But for the most part, not a very impressive race. The only one I'd want out of here is the winner, to be honest, going forward.
That's a really low figure for a filly who's going to be one of your favorites, if not potentially your favorite in the Kentucky Oaks.
Right. I mean, we grade these races. They have a grading before it's run, but I don't really think this was what I'd consider a grade 2, and it's kind of in contrast to the race we're going to talk about next, the Honey Fox. But, they're 3-year-olds, and they're always liable to jump up, just like Materiality did from a much lower figure to a 109. So,
Craig, explain this to me. So in the Honey Fox, Lady Lara earns a 115, but Sandiva, who ends up second, 1 point higher.
Yeah, and just to be clear, 1 point's not very much. I mean, it's basically even. But in this case, it was just because the pace was pretty quick, and Sandiva was up closer to it, battling, and whereas Lady Lara kind of got a better trip from the back of the pack. Had the pace been slow, you'd have seen just the opposite, where Lady Lara would have got a much better figure than Sandiva.
So we go to the fairgrounds.
This was a really fast race. I'm sorry. Lady Lara got a 115, Sandiva got a 116. And like we said, this is a grade 2 in name only. Yeah. It was a grade 1 race as far as I'm concerned. This race went 4/5 faster than the Appleton for males earlier on the card on the same exact course, same run-up, everything. So it was a very good race. Even Coffee Click impressed me with her win first off her race since Belmont Day.
It's interesting. So it sounds like, obviously the turf fillies, a little bit stronger than their dirt counterparts. We haven't
Right.
had an untappable or a dirt 3-year-old filly really jump to the head of the class so far yet.
Right. I think we're still waiting on Lady Eli, who's supposed to run at Keeneland, so that could change in a hurry.
Looking forward to that. Let's go back to Louisiana Derby this past weekend as well. International Star, I mean, he just keeps on winning races, this horse. He earns a 96 for this effort.
He did, and it's pretty decent for a grade 2. It's not great. This horse reminds me a lot of El Cabar that you guys were talking about earlier. He's a very good horse. I just don't know that his A game is going to be the Kentucky Derby type winner. The one thing I do like about him is he seems to be very tactical. He makes his own trips, and he just always seems to get a good one. You got to be leery of those horses going against him because they always seem to find a way to get to the winner's circle. And but I do think he would need to step it up. Like I said, he reminds me a lot of the horse you guys talked about earlier.
So, I mean, he was still able to get by Stanford, who had everything his way on the front end, and he still showed that grit and guts, and obviously he loves it at the fairgrounds. And, it came home, I think, talked about 39-3 in the Florida Derby, 35-2 the final 3 furlongs, but obviously that's partially because of how slow they were going up front early.
Right. It was a moderate pace. And this is a case where Stanford, I believe, actually got penalized a little bit compared to his final time number. If you had these two going against each other again, I don't see any way you could take Stanford unless you just expected him to get a lot better from one race to the next.
That's interesting because I think a lot of people gave Stanford so much credit off the materiality form, and we're kind of looking at him as maybe one of the wise guy horses coming out of the Louisiana Derby. What about the Fairgrounds Oaks there, Craig? I'm a Chatterbox. She earns a pretty nice figure for her effort, a 98.
Yeah, 98. This was the exception where, at this time of year, we get a lot of the fillies and colts run on the same card. And almost without fail, except for this horse, the colts have been much faster. But I'm a Chatterbox has been right there with the males. And she ran a good 98. She's proven she's versatile. She's came from last. She's won on the lead. She's pressed the pace. And she's just been a very good horse since joining the Larry Jones barn. And, I'm not sure how you can't be impressed with her so far.
So much more impressed with I'm a Chatterbox than Bird at the Wire at Gulfstream.
Yeah, especially in relation to the crop. I mean, a 98 is about as good as we've seen from 3-year-old fillies this year. Whereas, the Louisiana Derby International Star was so-so, and the Gulfstream Oaks, same thing, 90. 8 points is a pretty big gap, so I know who I'd want out of those two.
Craig, we'll talk to you again next week, but before I let you go, is there a 3-year-old that you're really looking forward to seeing run this weekend, whether it's Santa Anita, Wood Memorial, or the Bluegrass?
Is the Santa Anita this week? That's a couple weeks, right?
No, it's this week, too.
week, too.
It's this week.
Oh,
Saturday.
is it? Wow.
Yeah.
I got to get caught up. I've only looked at the Keeneland card so far. I guess I'd like to see Carpe Diem the most out of those, and Dortmund again. I mean, he's an exciting horse to see, but the one that interests me the most is Carpe Diem.
Yeah, the only horse that's beaten him so far is Texas Red, and he's not on the Derby Trail anymore. Craig, thanks for your information this morning. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
All right, great talking to you. Looking forward to a busy week next week.